Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Back in the studio with me, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Eric J. Morin.
You know, I'm feeling really good this morning. I had one of those nights where you wake up at like 4 a.m. and you can't go back to bed. That was my night. I think I went to bed at midnight and then woke up at 4. But nevertheless, I'm feeling energized. And I went to the gym this morning and I feel energized. I feel good. So we're going to have a great podcast. I mean, even despite not sleeping, I feel amazing. So there you go. Come like 6 o'clock tonight, I will crash hard. But right now,
I have a love-hate relationship with that. Like when I wake up at 4:30 and I'm just like staring at the ceiling, yeah, a lot of good thoughts come to mind. But then it's like, oh, now I got to go implement those thoughts. So great. I just created more work for myself.
Oh my God, right? I mean, that's the nature of the beast. I mean, it's constant.
And then just so you guys are aware, how that looks is, you know, around, because I'm an hour back in Dallas. So around probably, I would say 6:30 or something. Sometimes I'll get a text message from Eric like, hey, let me know when you're awake. I'm like, well, I'm up, but I'm not going to let you know I'm ready to go until like 7:15, get my coffee in, get my morning routine in. And then we talk on his way into the office. And then we're like, okay, now let's go get it done. It never stops, people. It never stops. But that's a good thing because you don't want it to stop. You want to keep good times rolling, baby. You want to keep them rolling.
I had a doctor I was talking to yesterday, and he was like, he had a giant goal. I won't give you the exact number, but it was over $15 million in top line revenue he wanted to get to. And so we got there and I looked at him and he was just like, I was like, all right, man, you got there. What do you want to do? And he's like, I just want to keep going. I have no desire to sell. I'm young. I'm healthy. I feel great. I was like, exactly. It's always one more thing, man. Got to keep it going.
You got to keep the foot on the gas, especially while the fire's hot. You got to keep the foot on the gas. There's people that like kind of get complacent. That's when they start to see things unfold that they don't want to see.
That's right.
We had a client, when was this? 4 or 5 years ago that, you know, we worked with them very hard on getting everything going and they were having a lot of success. And then we started having calls like, so how's all those things? Oh, we stopped doing those. And they started to see a decline in the business. And we were like, well, it's probably because you stopped doing everything that was making you successful.
Right.
So it tends to happen that way, even with anything in life. You have success and then you think you got it in place and then it starts to go down. So which kind of leads into the podcast discussion today. We're going to do a little bit of personal development. I think last week we introduced the 5 pillars. So I'm hoping you guys went back, took some great notes, wrote those things down, graded yourself out. So now we're going to jump into personal development. So with that being said, Eric, tell me a little bit about what you wanted to go into today, and then we'll go from
I'm going to give credit where credit is due. So we had Brian Hunter, who is the CEO of Tiny Rhino, at our Leadership Academy last week. And one thing you got to know about Brian is Brian has spent decades coaching leadership and development and those types of things. And I asked him to be a guest speaker with us. And he did such a phenomenal job. I mean, just incredible. And so I took down 5 points that I want to talk about today. And so I want to give him credit for those points because it's definitely his content. But I thought they were so good that I wanted to bring them up on this podcast. And so I'm going to go through them one by one. And usually when I take notes, I take all these notes, but I'm not going to go back and read all those notes. I don't know about anybody else, but I tend to not go back and read all these notes I thought I would read at some point. So usually when I'm sitting in a lecture or something, I just grab 5 key things that I know I could use in the future. And then if I go back and look at my notes, that's a bonus, but I probably won't. I probably just grab those 5 key things. So these are 5 key things that I took away that I thought were really good. So let's go first one. The first one, like, it hits you right in the throat, which is eventually who you are leaks out. And this one's really interesting because something I've been saying for years, and it seems like a broken record, but it comes back in my life over and over and over, and I keep seeing it over and over, is going back to the gym room, which I've talked about in this podcast, but it goes back to this point. What you have today is a product of the person you've become. So if your practice is thriving, if you've got high retention, if the profitability is great, if you're healthy, if you've got a great marriage, if you've got a full bank account, all of those things are a product of the person you've become. You worked hard, I was talking to somebody recently, we were playing 9 holes of golf, and he said, Eric, he was just talking about some of the things that have worked out well in my life right now. And he was talking about, business, personal, health, everything. He was like, man, And he was like, what you have, Eric, is, I mean, nobody knows, but you had your head down. You quit drinking. You cut out crappy foods. You ate well. You were disciplined. You focused on your business. You focused on your relationships. Like in his words, not mine, he said, you were willing to do what 99% of people won't do, Eric. And that's the thing about eventually who you are leaks out. And if you're not investing in yourself, if you're not investing in your health and your relationships and your physical well-being and all these things, like, you're not going to get there. Like, you can go to a seminar, you can listen to Tony Robbins or whatever you want to do, but if you haven't done the work as a leader, eventually who you are leaks out. Like, you can try to hide it for a little bit, right? You can put on a fake smile when you walk in the door. You can put on, some kind of, facade, but eventually who you are, like, you can only keep that up for so long. It's like the people who say, like, I'm different at my office than I am at home. I would challenge that. Like, so you have a different personality at work. Like, that almost sounds like a disorder. Like you're a different person at work. I don't understand that. So, so the first thing that Brian had said, and I thought was so good, which eventually who you are just leaks out. Like you have to do the work. If you're going to build a dental business, and this is the interesting part. It's like, what does this have to? I was on Gary Bird's podcast yesterday, and we were talking about, what are you going to do to build exponential growth? And people want to overlook this kind of stuff. Like, I was talking to a gentleman who runs a large consulting firm outside dental. And one of the things he said to me, he said, Eric, I find it interesting that I could get clients up to a certain amount without them focusing on themselves. Like, there was a limit I could get them to, but then they got stuck. Like, I realized that if they didn't do the work on themselves, there was a point in their business where they got stuck. And the beauty is that if you can realize that when you're young, right? If you can realize that when I say young, I mean young in business. When you can realize that when you're lower in revenue, maybe a better way to say it, then you're going to be better off. So when you start thinking about yourself, like, are you doing the work? Are you actually focused on personal development? Are you focused on going to the gym? Are you focused on taking the walk on the block? You and I did a meeting yesterday. I'll give everyone an example. You and I did a meeting yesterday, and while you and I were meeting, I was hiking. And not everybody obviously can hike while they do meetings. I get that. But you have your own resources that are different than mine. Like, you might take Friday off, and I don't take Friday off. And there's other, right? We all have our own circumstances that we can work around. But I did a 5-mile hike and burned, 700 calories, 800 calories, because I went up the mountain too while we were talking. So it's like, well, what is the compound effect of that over 5 years, 10 years? I watched this gentleman run to the top of the mountain at 84 years old. I only know that because someone was like, my dad turns 84 today. So are you prepared for battle? Like, are you prepared for battle? Are you really prepared for this, man? Because as a leader, you've got to be prepared for battle. And you can fake it only so much, but eventually who you are is going to leak out, right?
Yeah. I feel like it makes you anxious too. It's like the theory of pretender syndrome, where you're like pretending to be the person that, like, you're not quite yet, but you're unwilling to do the work to become that person, which leads to anxiety. That leads to you, like, not making decisions, procrastination. I know Brian was talking about in his thing about fear a little bit too. It leads to you being fearful, and it leads to you not making decisions to get things done. So that tends to happen when you're not kind of guarding your cup and you're not willing to develop yourself as a person. So it eventually is going to leak out. Like, you're eventually going to get in front of that group and have to present to them, and they're going to know pretty quickly that you don't know what you're doing or what you're talking about. So that's going to happen. So you need to prepare for, like you said, prepare for battle, prepare for war, prepare for the unexpected. That's the only way you're going to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, you got to be resilient, and you got to work hard. You better be ready for resilience now. You better get ready, because it's going to get tough. Which leads me to my second point, is you cannot wait for things to not be hard. I think people think to themselves, like, once I get past this, then I'll really focus on that. Like once I find the hygienist I need, then I'll focus on my business. Once I get the right doctor in place, then I'll really focus on those things. Once I get in health, then I'll focus on that. You can't wait for things not to be hard, like, because that's the game you're in. And there will always be a constraint. I was listening literally to a book on tape I guess there's no tapes anymore. I just aged myself. I was listening to an Audible this morning on constraint theory and talking about, the fact that there's always going to be constraints in business, and you can't wait for it not to be hard, because it will always be hard. There's always going to be a next step, a next phase, a next movement. And here's the crazy part is, as soon as you get to a place where things are calm, you'll get bored. And you'll throw in chaos into the mix because you're like, I'm bored. I want to be challenged. And if you don't get to that place, I would challenge whether you're an entrepreneur, because I think when great entrepreneurs get to a place where they're like, okay, everything's working great, kind of bored. And then it's like, okay, well, let's put some pressure on you again. And so we've talked about that in this podcast, which is the idea that you've got to be willing to take risk and put in pressure. Like, how much are you willing to take? So you can't wait for things not to be hard. And I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people they're trying to grow. They're just waiting for things not to be hard so they can get to the next step.
Yeah. It's almost like when you want to just focus in on retirement. Guess what? You get there and then you're kind of anxious. You're like, well, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And a lot of people go back to work. You're always going to be waiting for the next challenge. If you feel like you're good to go right now, there's going to be something that comes and smacks you in the face. And if you're not prepared for it, then you're going to have issues down the road. I think that's one thing that, you and I always look for is, all right, what's going to be the next challenge? What's going to be, it's not really a challenge. I look at it as an opportunity. It's like, what's going to be the next opportunity that's going to present itself to us? Because we're kind of like building our badges of honor of like, all right, we dealt with this, we dealt with this, we dealt with this. So it almost like when you go and look back at the journey, I appreciate all the challenges. I didn't want it to be easy. We didn't get into growing this organization for it to be easy. We wanted to be challenged along the way. Sometimes the challenges are great. Sometimes they want to make us pull our hairs out, but we wouldn't be where we were today if we didn't expect those challenges to come.
Which goes into point 3. I feel like we got great segues going on here, Matthew. Like we're like team.
We're in tune right now.
Pressure is a privilege, and you only get that if you're building something great. Man, it's so good. So good. I'm like, pressure is a privilege, man. You don't get pressure if you weren't skilled. You don't get pressure if you're not smart. You don't get pressure if you don't make commitments. You don't get pressure if you're not pushing the needle. Pressure is a privilege. You get to get pressured. You get to be in a situation as an entrepreneur where you get to push the limits, or you get to add in a building, or you get to add a location, or you get to add 3 doctors, or you get to, like, that's a privilege. Like, pressure is a privilege. And if you go back even a recount now, that's why you got to be ready. Like, you can't fake it. You've got to work on yourself, because eventually who you are is going to leak out. You're going to break because you're going to get under pressure, because pressure is a privilege, but you got to be ready. In fact, like that pressure, because you can't wait for things not to be hard, that pressure's coming. And so you can't wait for it to be easy. You can't wait for it not to be challenging. You want it to be challenging. You should encourage the strain and the strife, because those things will make you better. And when we're building a great organization, I challenge you to look at it different, and to look at it from a perspective of, man, this is like, I'm really blessed and I'm really lucky to be able to get the opportunity to build this business the way I'm building it. And I don't think people look at it that way.
No, you want the pressure. Like, you want to be in the pressure cooker, because it's just going to make you respect everything that you've accomplished more. If you go back and you look at it and you're like, yeah, this was the easiest road ever. It's always funny, like when someone says, oh, I'm going to go start my own consulting firm or accounting firm. Like, well, good luck to you. They just think it's going to be very, very simple, very, very easy. Just like when a new resident comes out of dental school, like, I'm just going to start my own practice. Well, good luck. Like, I know a lot of our listeners are like, well, good luck with that. But you want to experience the pressure, because the pressure, it almost helps you build your armor so that when the next thing comes along, you're in good shape. So if at some point in your business, if you're looking at it and you haven't felt that innate pressure yet, you're probably doing something wrong. Probably need to reevaluate what's going on.
Yeah, you're probably not giving yourself enough. You're not challenging yourself enough, which means you're never going to truly get to the limit you could have, or the level you could have reached had you have challenged yourself. And I think that that's a tragedy. I think that not pushing yourself to the limit is a tragedy. I think that's a complete mistake, which is why if I get to the next step number 4, which is leaders, and hear me on this. Leaders, keyword leaders, live a healthy, disciplined life. Man, I was saying on stage last week, I said, you want to learn how to lose like 20 pounds? Just come work at Tower Leadership. Like, look around. Like, isn't it interesting that everyone that works at Tower Leadership is in great, phenomenal shape, right? I mean, we got Andre Agassi over here recording, and or Pete Sampras, you'd probably like to be called. I just aged myself again. Look what I'm doing, Reese. I mean, it's a business of disciplined people, and leaders live a healthy, disciplined life. Like, you don't go when you spend time with great leaders. Like, leaders aren't getting plastered on Friday night. Leaders aren't looking to just get, to eat and gorge themselves. Isn't it interesting that if you sit down with great leaders, they're eating healthy. If they do drink, they drink with responsibility. They watch their words, and the words are measured, and they live a healthy discipline. Like, they're looking into nutritional benefits. They're hiring trainers and nutritionists and food prep companies. And isn't that interesting that leaders live a healthy, disciplined life, and the people who don't will end up with the compound effect of their actions, which is all falling apart. I mean, I had a cardiologist one time try to tell my kid what to do, and I was like, you're like 500 pounds. Like, the last thing I want my child is listening to a 500-pound cardiologist, because the fact that you look at heart disease all day long and yet do nothing for yourself personally means you're not only and I'll say this, and I'm actually serious about this, you're a poor leader. You're a poor leader in your home. You're a poor leader for your family. The fact that you know what this does and kills people, and you're looking at your family going, well, I know it kills people. I see it every day. I literally see the effects of this every day, but yet let me go to some fried chicken and mashed potatoes or whatever. And so it blows my mind. And so it's important to know, and I want everyone to hear me on this. And it is a little judgment. Healthy is not just physically healthy. It's also mentally healthy. It's important to know that you have to live a healthy, disciplined life. Leaders live a healthy, disciplined life. It's no mistake that most great leaders are in shape and they are mentally sound. And it's the compound effect. Like, you hang out with people who are doing great things, you'll find that they invest in all kinds of meditative work. They're going to personal retreats. They're focusing on their mindset. They're reading books on mindset. They're meditating. They're going to the gym. They've got nutritionists. They got meal prep. Because if you're going to get ready for battle, you've got to be mentally sound. And the battle comes every day when it comes to your family, when it comes to the food, when it comes to your team, when it comes to all these things. If you're not prepared as a leader, how do you deal with a low profitability month? You've got to be mentally sound to be able to handle these things. And so leaders live a healthy, disciplined life. It's so important for you to know that and realize that the things you do every single day not only affect you, they affect your family, they affect your patients, they affect your community, they affect everyone. Everyone is affected by your decisions as a leader. And if you're living an undisciplined lifestyle, how do you get to tell anybody else what to do? How do you have the authority to tell anyone else what to do? If I'm not living, so healthy, disciplined lifestyle doesn't mean I'm just going to the gym. It means everything in my life is about health and discipline. And I think that's important for people to know. I mean, it's just the truth.
Yeah. I think you got to determine who you want to be. I think that's one of the biggest things. You got to look yourself in the mirror and say, is this who I want to be? And am I ready for battle? Like, am I ready for the Super Bowl? If you're not saying tomorrow that you could compete in the Super Bowl, then you're probably not in the position you need to be in. No matter your age, no matter your ethnicity, no matter your gender, it doesn't matter. Like, you need to be prepared for everything, and you need to look at yourself in the mirror and say, am I the person that can handle all storms? Weather all storms? You always used to say winners come. Can I handle winter from just a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, from a financial standpoint? Like, am I in the position I want to be in? And the best part is, it's not too late. You can look at yourself, you listen to this podcast now and be like, you know what? I'm going to change this. And just set little goals for yourself. Don't try to go tackle everything and completely turn 180. Like, set goals from yourself, and you'll start to see a compound effect over time of what's going to happen.
Well, since I mentioned Jim Rohn would say, right, where do you start? Right? Does it have to be something monumental? No. Where would you start? Maybe it's just a walk around the block. Now, what he would say is that if you don't take a walk around the block, you probably won't eat an apple a day. And if you don't eat an apple a day, you'll probably have low bank account. If you have a low bank account, you probably have a poor marriage. If you have a poor marriage, and on, and probably have heart disease and all these types of things, high cholesterol. And well, yeah, because where do you start? You just start with the walk around the block. You start with an impactful conversation. You start with scheduling a retreat. You start with, it doesn't take the world, because if you make one decision, that decision will affect the next decision, right? If you focus on your health that day, then it will affect the way you ultimately put things in your body, which will affect your sleep, which will affect your focus the next day. Because the last one, which is when we are exhausted, we show the world the worst side of our emotions. When we are exhausted, we show the worst side of our emotions. I'll say it again. When we are exhausted, we show the worst side of our emotions. And isn't that the truth, right? So if we're not taking care of ourselves as leaders, and we're not pouring into ourselves, and we're not growing, and we're not ready for battle, and when things hit the fan, and it will, we're going to show the worst side of our emotions. Like, all of us have had that day, right, where you're just exhausted. You're just tired, man. You're up to, now for me, it's also when I'm hangry. But we have those days when you're just like you can't deal with anything else. You're like, I just can't deal with this right now. Like I've got decision fatigue. I've got too much going on. I just can't. And the reason why is because when we're exhausted, we show the worst side of our emotions. It's so important for you to understand that you can't show up exhausted, beat up, tired, confused, broke, right? Those things can't be, not to be a leader. To be a leader, you don't show up exhausted. Like, there was a day, in tower leadership where I literally woke up. I don't think I slept the night, whatever it was. I remember it was just bad. Like, I just canceled my calendar for the day. Like, I remember just being like, I'm not going in. And the reason why is because I was exhausted, and I know that under exhaustion, I'm going to show the worst side of my emotions, right? Frustration doesn't look the same, right? And so we have to know as leaders, like, we have to be self-evident, and it goes, and if you take number 5, go back to number 1, eventually who you are leaks out. And hell, isn't that the truth? So eventually who you are leaks out. So if you're not taking care of yourself, and you're not eating well, and you're not disciplined, and you're not focusing on being prepared for battle, and you look at pressure all wrong, and you're avoiding pressure because you're already tired and struggling, and your worst side of your emotions come out, and now you're getting pissed off, and you're losing team members because you're kind of an ass. And by the way, we see this sometimes. You'd be surprised. So now all of a sudden you don't take care of yourself. You're not disciplined. Your marriage is falling apart. So now all of a sudden that's leaking into your business, and your marriage falling apart. Your health's falling apart. You're in a crazy, horrible mindset. You're not getting enough sleep. You're showing up stressed out. You cannot build a great organization. There's no flipping way that under those circumstances you can build a great organization. And you go into Dental Wealth, and you go into this podcast, you go, well, I'm here to learn how to build a great organization. I'm telling you in this podcast, these are the things that people don't want to listen to, but it's the most important. Hell, if you took this podcast and you just bookended this thing and you said, I'm going to focus on these 5 things, I'm telling you right now, it's game changing. Because now, interestingly enough, and I'll give you a compound effect, and I'll be vulnerable here for a second. So I was lying in bed last night, Matthew. Now, this isn't going to go weird. Okay. So I was lying in bed last night, and I said to Braylee, I said, I'm a little frustrated. And she was like, why are you frustrated? And I was like, because when we were going into spring, I was in the best shape that I've been in like 10 years. And I wasn't as disciplined over the summer. And I tend to do that. I get ripped in the winter, and then I get fluffy in the summer. I don't know. Probably because summer's like, I want to enjoy life.
Yeah, you hit your goals. Yeah.
Right. In the winter time, I'm like, let's get ripped so nobody can see myself because I'm in 5 sweaters. So I was saying to her, I said, I'm disappointed. And she was like, why are you disappointed? I think you look great. I said, yeah, but if I had just stayed focused on the same path that I was on in the spring, man, I can't imagine what I would look like today. Like I can't even imagine what I would be going into this fall looking like. And so it's interesting. That's so true to life, is that in leadership, man, these doctors that you're hiring that are associates, they want to follow somebody. The front desk team, they want to follow somebody, and the hygienists want to follow somebody, and your wife wants to follow somebody, or a husband or kids or whatever it is, man. We look for leaders in this world. And the truth is that, so many people think because they're in a position of leadership, that makes them a great leader. And that's just not true. Being in a position of leadership, John Maxwell would say that, positional leadership is the lowest form of leadership there is. So if you're just like, well, I'm a doctor, so I'm a leader, so I'm good, check mark. It's so not true. Hell, half your problems are because you're not a great leader. And the biggest delusion is that you think you're a great leader. Now, we all have work to do. I'm not exception to that. I have work to do as well. We all have work to do. But I want you to hear me on this, to say, like, what could you do to grow yourself as a leader? Because if you can focus on leadership, taking care of people, serving people, honoring people, helping them grow, helping them develop, then you'll get the retention you want. You'll get the growth you want. You'll get the profitability you want. You'll get all these things you're trying to get. And the answer is to just go freaking focus on you, man. If you're not focused on your health, if you're not focused on your emotions, if you're not focused on your relationship, if you're not focused on these things as a leader, there's no possible way you can build the organization. You've got to lean into becoming a better leader, so that you don't show up in a way that ultimately taints the organization. And by the way, I just had a doctor send me, I don't even know where she did it. It wasn't through us. She took some survey. It was like the questions were pretty simple. Do you feel that this doctor cares about her patients? Do you feel like this doctor cares about their team members? Does this doctor, would you want to continue to work for this doctor? Or do you think they care about your emotions? It had like 8 questions, but it was but it was interesting to see the results, because these doctors thought to themselves, "Oh my gosh, our team loves us." One of these things was, do you think the doctor cares about your future, or something to that effect? And half the people said yes, strongly agree. Like 30% said agree, and like 20% said strongly disagree. But I want to say only half the people in the company strongly agree. Only half. Yeah. The other half are either neutral, or they don't feel like you're a great leader. And in this situation, it was like half of your company thinks you're a crappy leader. Half. Yeah. And that's important to know in this situation, in this practice. This doctor was vulnerable and sent her results over. And it's interesting to see that. And by the way, there was a lot of doctors in this practice. It was for all the doctors. So I got to see all the doctors' rankings. And so this stuff shows up every single day. You just don't realize it, is that they're watching you every single day. They're judging you every single day. And if you're not ready to go to war, if you're not mentally prepared, if you can't have the deep conversations, if you can't inspire, if you can't lead because you're tired, because you're hungover, because you're not mentally strong and physically strong, I'm telling you right now, you're going to hit a brick wall. You're going to keep losing team members, and you're going to struggle. And so I would take these 5 things. If you listen to this podcast, why listen to it if you don't take the time to write those things down?
Yeah. So the listeners know. So Eric came up with the concept of the 4 R's of leadership. So this falls into the category of resilience. So this whole, it's probably one of the most important, if not most important, R's of leadership in general is resilience. So how are you a resilient leader? How do you become a better leader when, shit hits the fan? So that's what this is focusing in on. So if you feel like sometimes when stressful situations come and you don't know what to do and you're kind of freaking out a little bit and you project that onto your team, this is the perfect opportunity for you to go back to these 5 points that Eric just went through and say, all right, so where do I lack? Like, where do I need to start? Where do I need to reassess my situation? How do I get better at each one of these areas so that I can become a better resilient leader? So I just wanted to put it in context for you, for the audience that's like searching. It's like, okay, so I need to focus on leadership. So what form of leadership? This is about becoming a better resilient leader, which is a key factor in your success, is making sure you you can handle these situations. So I just wanted to point that out for the audience so that they know kind of the context of where this is coming from.
Yeah, there's 4 R's of leadership. One is representation, which is how you show up every single day. 2 is remedy. How do you deal with conflict matters, and being able to consistently deal with conflict in a consistent manner, because you have different people in your organizations that handle conflict differently. Then you erode trust, because inside of an organization you have to have trust, and trust is done by consistency. So how do you remedy difficult situations? And then this one, which is resilience. How do you become resilient as a leader to deal with difficult times and challenges? And then lastly, results. Like, how do we get results? Because great leaders get results. If a football team goes 0-17, it doesn't matter if they get along in the locker room. That's why people think that leadership's all fluff, and it's just not. Nick Saban, I have no idea if he was a nice guy in the locker room or not, but I know how many national championships he won. People would consider him a great leader because of his results. And results matter too. But you can't get results. You'll never get results if you can't deal with conflict, if you can't be resilient, and if you don't take care of yourself and represent well and get people to want to follow you. Those things come first so that you can get the results. You can inspire and lead the team. But you can't do that if you're not ready.
Yeah. Resilience is key. If you're listening to this, resilience. And shout out again to Brian Hunter for having an amazing presentation. I know everyone that was at the event was extremely thankful for having him. So we'll have him present more periodically for some of those type of things, because his true passion is leadership. So you can see it when he's on stage. So if you were able to be there for that, it was a great presentation. But make sure you guys like, subscribe, share this message with others. We always say that at the end of the podcast, but we truly mean it. Like, go share this with somebody that's dealing with these challenges right now. Maybe someone's lost a couple associates, or a partner left the program, where they're thinking about selling because they're tired of dealing with all the situations and those type of things. Go share this with somebody. Go watch this on YouTube. It's, when you watch something more repeatedly, you get more out of it. So if you're listening to this in the car, when you get home, go subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the actual video version of it. Share it with other people. I think, this has been a great podcast. I like being back in the studio with you, Mr. Morin. Anything else you'd like to add on before we close it out?
Matthew is officially a married man. So if you see him in person, give him a congratulations. We're happy for you. And Matthew is going on his honeymoon. So you might not see Matthew for a bit, but we're happy for him. Congratulations, my friend. We'll see you guys next time.